Alright, press the button. Now I guess I'm making a video. Tried this video. Been thinking about this video for a couple of days. Just really haven't known how to do it exactly. So I have just not done it. So anyway, I've been watching some movies, mostly science fiction stuff, and it's just weird. I haven't watched movies in a while, and they're just kind of affecting me in a way. It's kind of strange. Anyway, so there's been this general conversation about consciousness, and even Great Text made a video about evolutionary psychology, and then the Modern Mystic left this comment on his blog post. Not that I give it much thought, but I thought Gary would be right first, then me, as in the world would realize that all sentient creatures are of equal importance, then that no sentient creature controls its own actions. But thinking about it this morning, and then he talks about how Google's whatever idiotic car thing is going to be somehow significant, and that's not going to. I mean, that's sort of a trivialization of the whole point. You just start pointing out that the cars will. How are you going to blame cars if they're mechanically operated? Who's going to be to blame when there's an accident? Sort of implying that everything we do is an accident. Everything we do is just byproduct. Everything that we are is byproduct. So I don't know what movie triggered it, but it's just that I started thinking about the formula in every movie. Movies have all these formulas, and they all appeal to the roles we play, or the roles we wish we played, as sort of the Jedi syndrome. I guess all people aspire to, some sense of being better, or heroic. I don't know. Something like that, or having, the whole having thing. Even though most of the movies I watched were sort of imply that the having thing is always kind of fleeting. But what kind of ruin people will end up in to have, And this whole mechanism of desire, which sort of gets to the Great Text rag on the kind of the subject of evolutionary psychology. We're just playing word games basically, but it's just this notion of how much of our, how much of the nature of our motivations, our passions, are controlled by evolutionary mechanisms. And somebody says the word design somehow, in terms of how you have a certain attribute because it's conducive to survival. He finds that language too explicit, as if you're implying deliberate creation, and you're just saying that the mutations, the changes in us that make us more survivable are likely to be retained, and those do fit a pattern. I mean, the things that make you more survivable do fit a pattern, and the pattern's not necessarily a good pattern. It's kind of a brutal, calculating self-interest first, and friendships for the purpose of usury. Very parasitic in how we use our social relationships. If it gets your genetics into the future, it does. It is very, even when it's unselfish, it's rather selfish, and that's the sort of the mechanism we're stuck with. That we don't do anything good, very sincerely, in the sense of trying to just be good. What we're really trying to be is superior. We've made it part of the reason why people do anything good is usually because they have some sense of honor, and that will be degraded if they compromise it by taking advantage or considering their own welfare before somebody else's. These kind of illogical things that we do, the way we dismiss the hardships of others, and certainly most people do it with animals. They put them in some, just imagine that somehow their consciousness is degraded because they don't have a vocabulary. Even though they can see that there's every evidence that they're having a very intense emotional experience, and that it is our emotions that we value most in terms of the sensations we feel. In terms of the personal qualia, it really is about the feelings, not the thoughts. It's about the satisfactions of the needs that exist inside of us, these perceptual needs. So the other element would be is that there is also an evolution of culture and bullshit that we're raised on, stories, the narratives, so the stories are part of the background that establishes our programming. And we're very much just machines. We're just mechanically reacting in very sort of predictable ways within ranges of behavior. And in many ways it might as well come off assembly lines. It might as well be something created for us to be. So even think of The Matrix, how in that movie there's this idea of freedom from living in the artificial world, but the very identity of the humans is in a sense already a fake identity, because they've been spawned by the Matrix. Their genetic code is the Matrix's contrivance in many ways, and certainly their pre-programming would be established in purely as that in that fake environment. And so what freedom would you have when everything about your conditioning, everything about your sense of truth and dishonesty and integrity and all that stuff was something the Matrix gave you? There's movies are all so in the movie AI, there's this idea of an artificial sentient, creating a sentient, a little kid that just wants to be loved, and that's all it does, and that somehow people would gravitate to having some child, I guess, that would stay young forever and just love them, and desire their love, their appreciation. I mean, I don't really relate to that theme at all, but the idea of creating a sentient, the idea of a sentient not programmed by crude biology, but programmed by some sort of just establishing an agenda, a desire to be loved, and just leave that, leave it like that, and then to fixate it on, say, one individual even. But whatever we do isn't that much different. Just because our fixations have a little more range, it's still a fixation. It's still a mechanical process that possesses us, that drives us, and there's no choice. We don't choose to be the people we are. We're just byproduct again of process, of exposure, of experience. We're a consequence of the environment that nurtures us, and certainly we're a product of partially the nature that creates the fundamental disposition. Though we're very much just machines, just calculating, processing, reflexive machines. And so it sort of relates also, I guess, to the whole conversation about antinatalism, in the sense that what are we? We're just creating the problem. The problem doesn't exist in the world where the world needs us to show up to have a feeling. It just doesn't. and we just have this obsession with this idea that there's some accomplishment in satisfying a desire, having a desire and chasing, and no matter how inefficient it is, how many how many dead you leave behind you to create your bit of exceptionalism. Getting back to Nietzsche, it's just this it's just an insane, silly ratio of values, for an agenda, right? Like I said, it's all this agenda machine kind of stuff, and that the agenda is always tainted by some sort of mission statement. From the biology's point of view, there's this mission statement of perpetuation, replication. That's all it knows, so to speak. It knows nothing, but I mean that's all it functions as. So many subjects get tied into this. So that would be my biggest criticism with Gray text is he has sort of a myopic, narrow understanding of evolution, which makes it irritating when he's so pompous and how he's ridiculing other people's verbiage, just the way they say something, not the point they're really trying to make. Because most evolution doesn't take place in a competitive environment where where you take the herd doesn't evolve. It's the go west, young man idea. It's the separatists who evolve. It's the ones that branch off of the herd, that go out and separate themselves. They're the ones that do the evolving, and so there can be very extreme change in a small population. But yeah, most evolution probably doesn't take place any other way, just because of the dampening effect of the herd. The herd would always eliminate the Borg, so to speak. The popular would always drown out any even good mutations if they took place, just by sheer volume. It would always tend to want to stay the way it is. So I think it would need that distance and separation. So then it's evolving in a different world than the world the herd will end up living in. And so what really happens is trials of gangs, of tribes, just end up fighting with each other. So instead of individuals fighting, it becomes kinds separated by time fighting with each other. And the Europeans coming to North America is a perfect illustration that here you have this evolution that tracked for 50,000 years in two different directions, migrated around the globe, and then met again, having radically changed, mutated, not radically, but obviously from our perspective it's a radical change in sophistication and acquisition of knowledge and book learning and all of that stuff, and some racial, some physical changes to go with that, lifestyle differences, and there's just another battle, another, one wins, one loses kind of thing, just to, again, playing this game of like it makes a difference who's stronger, by these stupid definitions, when the only good question to ask is who cries harder, who cares deeper, who loves more beautifully, who can who can splendor, experience awe, reach some sort of true, passionate, deep feeling, and yet that doesn't mean anything in this competition. It's all about some crass strategy of survivability. That's all that matters. And then then that just ends up creating some kind of non-feeling thing, some kind of machine, even more machine-like, that can tolerate all kinds of imperfections and sloppiness and piggery and nonsense. It's there's something to be said for the pedigree. It might only be able to run one race, but its one race will be great, kind of thing. It might not be as durable as the plow horse, but the thoroughbred is a sight to behold in its moment of greatness. So anyway, that's sort of a subject. So anyway, the real point is that we're manufactured, and as much as we'd like to think we have some choices, or we have some freedoms, or we have some sort of we in here that does something, it's just this package of reflexes, package of responses that happen to us. It just happens to us, the programming, and then we're just stuck with what it leaves us to be, a combination of our genetics and our maturation and the fortune of our interactions, and that's all we get. That's all there is. And it's just kind of dismal and sad and horrible. Somebody's calling me, which is weird. Anyway, so I don't know how far to push it, but I just, I think there's an important theme here in the sense of the how much of what we are doesn't really escape of virtual reality already, in the sense that we're just so mechanical. So much of what it is just a mechanism, and we think there's something lesser in other mechanisms, some other style of mechanism. But we're just in a way mimicking life too. I mean, we're just mimicking being alive. I mean, we call it that because we have a beating heart and we're biological. But our fable, our story that we tell ourselves of what we're doing isn't what we're doing. It's an aggrandizement of something. Little machines, little built, constructed things that just do their little mission statement. They just follow orders, so to speak, follow the pattern, and the only thing that goes beyond that is this reasoning capacity that can sit there and just simply look outside of the structure of it, just recognize it for what it is and say, yeah, that's what it is. It's a maze. I've been built to navigate it. I navigate it by reacting to it, and I react to it based on the programming of 21st century whatever life form, and it's just so mechanical, and I just don't. There's no. Just the fact that it just creates this kind of dissidence in individuals like myself should be reason enough not to play with it, not to say it's something you play with. It's a toy. It's not. And in most of the movies I've been watching, they've sort of all got this tragic element, and the tragic element is always just this fact that we're not really constructed to be as I mean, you could say that we step beyond a capacity to be dumb enough to be a bug, but it's a bug's world, it's a bug's universe, because there's nothing else to do but be a bug. I mean, there's no other way to play the game but as a bug, because it will hurt you otherwise. I mean, there just really isn't any choice. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. You're either cleaning up the mess or you're making messes. There doesn't seem to be any other choices. So anyway, yeah, this is why I put off the videos, because I don't have a clear enough statement to make, except that I just think people really should start to recognize just how much of who they are is just a bunch of residue of experience. And it doesn't have any intrinsic integrity in terms of their native reactions. And the only thing that does have any integrity is the capacity to step above it and recognize what's happening, to see it for the there's just this, it's so hard to explain this. Just it's self-generating in the sense that it makes the mess and it creates us to clean it up. I mean, there's just no need to do that, no need to create this need mechanism so we can just search forever. Just keep searching for some sort of perfect satisfaction. It's not going to be able to attain. You just keep regenerating the hunger over and over and over. And it's time to let that go. And such. So forth and whatnot. Melancholy. I am melancholy. Yeah.